I needed to share something with you real quick. Our missions minister, John Lowe, you might not know this, but he's in prison doing ministry. So I just wanted to make sure I get that part out there. So he texted me this morning. He went in Thursday, or has been going in and out since Thursday with a ministry called WOW. And this ministry is trying to reach out to the prisoners there. And so this is the fourth day of a highly intensive time of ministry in the prison. And he texted me early this morning saying, please pray. There's been some issues in the prison. And I think they've had a lockdown since he's been down in there, and just several things like that. So Satan's trying to block what they're doing. And he's speaking today. So before I speak, will you join me in prayer for John and the rest of the team? Father, thank you so much that you placed John and that team in that place to minister to those men who need to hear about your love and your grace and your mercy and your forgiveness. I pray that you would just anoint everybody who's going to speak there today. Anoint John as he's getting ready to share, and anoint all the other speakers. And I pray, Father, for a supernatural intervention in everything that's going on. Satan's trying to block it, but we know Satan is not going to win. We know that you are able to do far beyond anything that we can ever imagine. So we lift up that entire group to you as they are ministering to these men in that prison today. Keep them safe and help them to share the gospel unashamedly and with great courage. In your name we pray. Amen. Today we're going to talk about the madness of sin. There's a guy in the Old Testament. If you go back to the Old Testament, the very first book of the Bible in Genesis, you'll read about a guy whose name is Abram. Abram eventually has his name changed to Abraham. But God speaks to Abraham one day, and he says to Abraham, I want you to take you and your family, and come on, I got a place I want to show you, and it's going to be all yours. I'm going to carry you to a brand new land. And so Abraham took his wife Sarah and his nephew Lot, and they left their home to go to a place that they had never been before, to a land that God was going to show them. And so as they travel on this journey, and as they're going to this place that they don't know where they're going, but they're going anyway, they're just trusting God, their herds and their flocks begin to grow. Their cattle, their sheep, and all that began to multiply. And Abraham and Lot become very wealthy. And they become wealthy with a lot of livestock. And this livestock gets to the point where the land that they are on at the time cannot contain both Abraham and his livestock and Lot and his livestock. And it gets to the point where Abraham and Lot's herdsmen, the people taking care of the livestock, they begin to fight among themselves. And so Abraham goes to Lot and he said, I have a solution. He said, this land can't handle all of us, and it's not right for us to fight. We're family. So it's not right for us to fight amongst each other. It's not right for my workers and your workers to fight. So listen, this is what I want you to do. He said, I want you to look at the land. And he said, Lot, you pick where you want to go live. And if you decide to go to the east, I'll go to the west. If you want to go north, I'll go south. We will separate, and that way the land can handle us. So you pick where you want to live and go, and you go there, and then I will go the opposite direction. Well, we pick up the story in Genesis chapter 13. And in Genesis 13, we read this about how that Moses, in Genesis 13, begin at verse 10. It should be on your insert that you have there. In Genesis 13, it says this: Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted ways. Abraham lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now, Lot could have chosen any place he wanted to live. Abraham said, you pick it, you go, I'll go the opposite place. He could have chosen any place to go. He could have gone in any direction, and yet he chose to live near Sodom. Why is that so significant? Why is that so important? Well, listen to this. The next verse tells us why it's significant about where he chose to live. It says, now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. Out of all the places that Lot could have chosen to go to, he chose to go and to pitch his tents right outside of this sinful, wicked place called Sodom. We know one of the reasons that Lot chose the area. See, Lot went up and he surveyed the area as much as he could see, and he saw that the land near Sodom was very well watered and was good land. The choice of Lot to go there tells us something about the character of Lot. He chose the best land, not the best location, but the best land for himself, and was not concerned about what would happen to old Uncle Abraham, who had taken him in and raised him up. Lot chose to live in the area, though it meant that he and his family would be living near a very sinful and very evil city. Now, have you ever heard of a place in that even though you have never been there, you know what kind of place it is? Let me give you a few examples, and maybe to help stir your thinking for just a second. You ever heard of Disney? Even if you've never been to Disney, you know what everybody says, it's the happiest place on earth. If you're headed to Disney, if you've never been there and you've heard about it, you know kind of what to expect. You expect to have some fun. You expect to have a good place to be there. You have an expectation about a place that you might not have ever gone to. There's another place here in town called Taste Buds. If you've never been to Taste Buds, you might have already heard about Taste Buds. And if you go to Taste Buds, you know what you're going to experience? You're going to experience some good, sweet treats. There's another place near here called Sammy's. You've never been in Sammy's, and I've never been in Sammy's. I want that on the record. It's on the video, it's on every recording, everything. But if I say Sammy's, any of you who have heard of that place have an expectation about what it's like in that place. What if I say Hawaii? I've never been to Hawaii. I hope to go one day. But if you've never gone, you have an expectation about what it's like. You know, beaches and volcanoes and, other stuff that's there. You have an expectation about what it's like. If I say Iran, you have an expectation about what Iran would be like if you went there. Even though you've never gone there. You've got enough information to build an opinion about Iran and all this other thing. See, even though you may have never gone to any of these places, you know the kind of places they are. Just to mention their names brings to you an idea of what they are like. See, you don't buy tickets to go to see the Blue Wahoos play and expect to see a basketball game. You know you're going to see a baseball game. See, Lot knew what he was getting into whenever he chose to go live near Sodom. There's no way that Lot would not have known of the sin and evil and corruption in Sodom. He lived close enough to see the city. He got up in an area where he could look at all the area and take and get an idea of what everything was in that whole area. Lot had so much livestock that it's very, very high likelihood that he would have done business with at least some of the people in Sodom. If not with people who actually lived in Sodom, he had done business with people who had been to Sodom. He knew about this city. There's no way he couldn't have. Listen, don't miss this. Lot knew what he was moving close to when he moved there. You know, I don't believe that Sodom's reputation caught Lot off guard. I don't think it caught him by surprise. Lot was well aware of what kind of neighbor he was going to be having when he pitched his tents near Sodom. Have any of you ever had a really good neighbor? I mean, I've got great neighbors. I mean, I've got great neighbors. As a matter of fact, we chose to live near each other. We bought houses close to each other. Moved to there within just a few months of each other when we were looking for places. And we lived near each other. And Ed and Mary have been great to us. And I hope they could say that about us. But they've been great to us anyway. They've been great neighbors. So see, what we've done is, they're patient, they're caring, they're friendly, they're helpful. They don't complain if I'm late cutting the grass. We share food together. We share recipes back and forth. We've worked together on some projects around our house. We love our neighbors. We got good neighbors. But have you ever had a bad neighbor? Well, I want you to know sin is a bad neighbor. I hope Ed and Mary didn't raise their hand when I said if you had a bad neighbor. You see, Lot started out living near Sodom. And the sin of Sodom was so bad that it affected the whole area. Listen, unchecked sin in our lives will affect all parts of our lives. If you allow sin to hang out in your life long enough, it's going to mess up every part of your life. It's going to taint everything in your life. It's going to corrupt everything in your life. If you allow sin to continue in your life unchecked, it's going to mess you up. Kay Arthur, an author and speaker, she says this: if you tolerate sin in your life, that sin will not only take you farther than you wanted to go, it will keep you longer than you wanted to stay, and it will cost you more than you wanted to pay. If you tolerate sin in your life, that sin will not only take you farther than you wanted to go, it will keep you longer than you wanted to stay, and it will cost you more than you thought you'd pay. Sin is a bad neighbor. It's like having that neighbor that never cuts their grass, that has garbage all over their yard, that has vehicles setting up all over the places. Their yard is a junkyard. It's like having that neighbor that has mean dogs that they don't control, that plays loud music at all hours of the night, that parks cars in front of your driveway and in front of your house where you can't even get out of your own place. Sin is that bad neighbor that cares nothing about you. And if you're not careful, sin will suck you into its trap. See, sometime after Lot moved near Sodom, the king of Sodom and several other kings went to war with another king who had been ruling over them. And during this war, Sodom lost, and the victorious king and his allies came in to Sodom and looted the whole town and took people captive. So the conquering king, he also took Lot and his family captive. You remember, it said that Lot pitched his tents near Sodom, right? It said that this conquering king came and took Lot and his whole family captive. Why did they mess with Lot? Well, Genesis 14:12 tells us exactly why they messed with Lot. It says they also carried off Abram's nephew Lot and his possessions. Catch this last sentence. Since he was living in Sodom. See, he started out beside Sodom. He started out near Sodom. But now he had moved from being near Sodom to living in Sodom. The sin and evilness of Sodom had sucked Lot and his family into the city. And even if Lot had not known about Sodom before he moved near there, he certainly knew about it once he was living near Sodom. Lot made the choice to move his family into the middle of sin. How could he do that? I remember our first church. I remember all our churches really well that Anita and I have served in. But I remember our very first church. Our very first church, if you went to the middle of nowhere, Alabama, and hung a right, eventually you would get to this little town called Pennington, Alabama. And I bet hardly anybody in here has ever heard of Pennington, Alabama. Well, Pennington, Alabama had a population of maybe 2,000, probably not. That's probably counting the cows and the dogs and everybody else. So, it wasn't very big. But what they did have was a paper mill. And when we first moved to Pennington, that paper mill was the worst smelling thing I have ever smelled in my life. I mean, I never lived near a paper mill. It was horrible. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, you want to walk around like this, it was horrible. But what is very interesting is that the longer we live there, the less we notice the paper mill. As a matter of fact, after a while, we lived there 5 years. After a while, people would come and, when they would come and visit us, our family and friends would come and visit us and stay with us. They'd come in and say, "What is that smell?" And we'd look at them and go, "What smell?" See, we lived there long enough that the smell, the stench of the paper mill no longer affected us. We didn't even notice it anymore. See, Lot had become so accustomed to sin and tolerant of sin that he was no longer affected by sin. He accepted the sin of Sodom as a normal way of life. See, it's sad, but the same can be true about us. We can get to the point that we allow unchecked sin to hang around in our lives for so long that we're no longer feel affected by it. We begin to see sin as something else that's just normal. Oh, this is just our normal life. This sin is just normal. Don't you have it in your life? I mean, it's just normal. I found a quote that gives a perfect illustration of how sin sucks us in. It's by a pastor, a priest by the name of Dwight Longnecker. He writes this. He said, "First we overlook evil, then we permit evil, then we legalize evil, then we promote evil, then we celebrate evil, then we persecute those who still call it evil." Good example is abortion. I mean, you go back a few decades and abortion was frowned upon almost universally. And now, if you are pro-life, which I'm unapologetically 100% pro-life, in case you hadn't figured that out, but if you're pro-life, you can be attacked. As a matter of fact, there's plenty of evidence out there, plenty of video evidence out there showing how pro-life people have been physically attacked just because they're pro-life. One knucklehead kicked a woman in the face when she was out talking about being pro-life. You see, sin just sucks us in. It sucks us in and keeps sucking us in. Notice Lot's progression. Lot decided to move near Sodom, even though he was aware of the evilness there. And then just living near Sodom was not enough. He decided to move into Sodom. Because he was living in Sodom, he and his family were taken as captives by the enemy. And old Uncle Abraham had to come and rescue him again. When we allow unchecked sin to start infiltrating our lives, then we're heading down a slippery slope that's going to lead to our destruction. Sin will not only suck you into its trap, sin cannot hide forever. One day, Abraham was out living in the opposite side of Lot, away from Lot. He was out there living there. And 3 visitors stopped by Abraham one day, and they were on their way to Sodom. And their purpose of going to Sodom was to destroy the city. These are 2 angels, and the Lord dropped in to see Abraham. And this is what God told Abraham. He said this in Genesis 18. He says, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. God says, I'm checking this out. And he sent these 2 angels ahead to check out Sodom and to check out what was going on there. And so, and Abraham knew that God was getting ready to destroy Sodom. And he said, listen, God, listen, can we talk about this for a minute? Listen, instead of just destroying everything, he says this, will you destroy the city if 50 righteous people can be found in Sodom? God said, I'll spare it for 50. Abraham said, well, what about 45? God said, I'll spare it for 45. Abraham said, well, what about 40? What if you can find 40 there? Will you spare it? And he said, I'll spare it for 40. Abraham said, now, please be patient with me. What about 30? What about 20? What about 10? God, listen, what if there's 10 righteous people? Will you spare the entire city for 10 righteous people? God said, I will spare it for 10 righteous people. So God sends 2 of his angels on in there. He sends them disguised as men to check out Sodom. And Lot meets these men when they entered the city. He stops them and he talks to them and he asks them if they would come and stay with him. And we pick up that part of the story in Genesis 19. It says Lot is talking about him, but he insisted so strongly that they, the 2 men, angels described as men, that he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them. Morality no longer existed in Sodom. Lot chose to live in this city that was so corrupted that any and all behavior was accepted by everybody. You see, sin does something else to you. Sin distorts your judgment. Sin distorts your judgment. Now, if we look at the next scripture in Genesis 19, notice what happens here. When these men surrounded the house of Lot, as they surrounded his house, Lot told the men, these 2 men, the angels disguised as men, to stay inside. And he says, I'm going to go out here. And we pick up the story again in verse 6. It says this. Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind them. And he said, no, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. The next verse is one of the most disturbing verses I've ever read. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you want or what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. His daughters were supposed to be under the protection of his roof. Instead of condemning the actions of these men, Lot condoned their actions. Instead of coming out and said, guys, y'all need to get out of here. This is not right. This shouldn't happen. This shouldn't be this way. You need to leave. You need to get away from here. No, Lot says, no, listen, don't mess with these men. I got my 2 girls. You can have them. He offered up his 2 daughters to these men to do whatever they wanted to them. How could a father do that to his daughters? Lot to me is worse than garbage. He had become so hardened by sin and by living in such an evil city that these evil acts in this evil city did not even faze him. I mean, you can see how the wickedness of this city caused it to stink, and the stench made God sick. It's no wonder God wanted to destroy the city. Listen, don't miss this. Lot led his family into sin. He did not protect his family. He put his family in a place that was filled with evil. Lot did not fulfill his responsibility of leading his family in the right direction and in protecting them. Notice just how far away from God Lot had moved. Listen, anytime you get too close to sin, you're going to get dirty. And anytime you allow sin to hang around in your life, you're going to become corrupted by it. The estimated population of Sodom and Gomorrah was somewhere between 40,000 and 65,000 people. And Abraham had asked God to spare the city if 10 righteous people could be found. 10. Out of between 40 and 65,000 people, Abraham said, if 10 can be found, will you spare the city? Can you see the devastation that when unchecked sin is allowed to run rampant and not be dealt with, when people refuse to repent, when they would rather live in sin than turn their back on sin and go to a God that loves them, not even 10 righteous people could be found out of the tens of thousands of people living in that area. Not even 10. In Genesis 19, begin at verse 12, these two men, these angels disguised as men, they said to Lot, do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here because we're going to destroy this place. The outcry of the Lord against its people, the outcry to the Lord against his people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it. Sin corrupts your character and it destroys your witness. These angels, they were giving Lot time to get his family. He said, you go collect your family, your in-laws, your kids, whatever. You collect your family and get them out of here. We're getting ready to destroy this city, and you need to collect them all and get them out of here. So what Lot does is he goes to his future sons-in-law, and he goes to them and to try to get them to leave so that they would not be destroyed. Now, and the writer of Genesis picks up the story in Genesis 19. He says this, so Lot went out and he spoke. He spoke to his sons-in-laws who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, hurry and get out of this place because the Lord is about to destroy the city. Notice what he says. But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. God's getting ready to destroy this place, and his son-in-laws are laughing it off. Yeah, right, Lot. That's a good one. That's a good one. Got any more jokes? You see, Lot had lived so long and become so contented among ungodly people that he no longer was a believable witness to God, about God. Lot had gotten so far away from God that his future sons-in-law would not even believe him whenever he said that God was going to destroy the city. Any witness that he had was destroyed by Lot by allowing unchecked sin in his life. You see, Lot had allowed his environment to shape him instead of him shaping his environment. Let's get real personal. We've been talking about some guy who lived thousands of years ago. Let's get real personal. Do the people we know see us as a witness for God, or are we just one of the crowd? Do you blend in unnoticed? Do you tolerate things that you know are offensive to God? You see, Lot had compromised so much that he was useless to God. When he finally made a stand, nobody listened to him. Have you allowed sin to run unchecked in your life so much that you've become useless to God because you have become too much like your environment? See, to make a difference, you have to first decide to be different, both in your faith and in your conduct. I love what Peter wrote. Peter wrote this in 1 Peter. He said this, he said, live such good lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day He visits us. In other words, live a life so much that's so different from the rest of the world, that's so different from the environment, the ungodly environment that we find ourselves in. Live such a good life that people can't even accuse you. Even pagans, even unbelievers, even atheists cannot come up and accuse you of doing wrong because of your character and the way you live your life. No one listened to Lot when he was trying to save their lives. The question I have for us is, will anyone listen to us when we're trying to save their souls? Are we living our life in such a way that people will at least believe that we believe what we're talking about? How has our life that we are living earned us the right to be heard among the people that we know? Back to Lot. The time came for Sodom and Gomorrah to be destroyed. And the angel said to Lot, he said, flee for your lives. Don't look back and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains or you will be swept away. Get out of here. Go as far as you think you can go and then go a little further. Don't stop anywhere close to here. Get away from here. See, Lot knew that Sodom was going to be destroyed. He believed that with all his heart. But I want you to notice what Lot wanted to do when he left the city. In Genesis 19, the writer writes this, but Lot said to them, they just said, leave. Destruction is coming. Get out of here. Then Lot starts bargaining. He says this, but Lot said to them, no, my lords, please. Your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life. But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me. Notice that. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. And he says this, don't go to the mountains. If I go to the mountains, I'm going to die. He says, but look, here is a town near enough to run to. And it's small. Let me flee to it. It's very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared. Lot had been living in sin for so long, he didn't want to leave even though he knew death was imminent. I don't want to go a long ways away. Let me go near here. There's this little town right over here. He'd become so comfortable with his sin that he didn't want to give it up. He was in the very situation that he was in because he had moved near Sodom and he didn't want to leave it. Any Lord of the Rings fans here? If you haven't read the book or watched the movies, spoiler alert, okay? Just give you a heads up. It's great. I've watched all 13 hours of the movies. Okay, it's great. But how many of you remember Smeagol? Anybody remember that little ugly joker, ugly hairless thing? He talks like this, Smeagol, you know. Smeagol spent his entire life looking for Precious. You remember what Precious was? Precious was this ring that supposedly had all these powers with it. And he spent his entire life looking for Precious. And it consumed his every waking moment. He was willing to lie, cheat, steal, kill, do whatever it took to get his Precious. Nothing mattered to him except for that Precious that was going to destroy him. And Smeagol died a horrible death seconds after getting the ring. Unchecked sin can do the same to you. The longer you allow unrepented sin to stay in your life, the more damage it's going to do to you. It will so consume you that it will destroy you. I want to invite you to do something today. I'm not going to embarrass you. Don't worry about that. But I do want to invite you to just bow your head and close your eyes. The reason I'm asking you to do that is I'm asking you to do a little reflection right now. I'm asking you to do a little soul searching. I just want to ask you a couple of questions. I'm not going to ask you to stand up, raise your hand, or anything like that. I want to ask you to do this. I want you to spend just right now a little private time with God. And I want to ask you, what is your pet sin? What is the sin that you're holding on to so tightly? What is that sin that you're allowing to hang around in your life right now? I want to invite you right now to just talk to God about it. I want to invite you right now to ask God to take that away and to repent of that sin. You know what it is. You know what you're struggling with. You know the sin in your life you need to get rid of. And you're not strong enough to do it on your own. Talk to God right now for just a moment and ask Him to remove it. Father, as we come before you right now, there are those that have struggled. I mean, all of us, we've struggled with something in our life. We struggle with the sin that has been so hard for us to give up. It's our pet sin. We want to keep it. It's our precious that we want to hold on to. When all that precious is doing is bringing death and destruction. I pray, God, that you would help us to release that. For those who are within the sound of my voice right now and you're dealing with unchecked sin in your life and you want to turn that all over to the Lord. You want to give that up right now. And you want to begin a relationship with Jesus Christ, the one who has died for your sin. If you want to do that, I want to invite you to just pray this very simple prayer. If you've never accepted Jesus and want to begin a relationship with Him, I want to invite you to pray this prayer just between you and God. And you can remember it with these 4 words. The first one is sorry. And so in your own words, just repeat after me. God, I'm sorry for my sin. I'm sorry I've let it hang around in my life too long. I'm sorry that I've rejected you up to this point. The next word is please. Please come into my life. Please forgive me of my sin. Please become the Lord of my life. The last 2 words are thank you. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for never giving up on me. And I just release all my sin to you for your forgiveness. Father, for those who prayed that prayer for the first time in minutes, strengthen them in their brand new relationship with you. Remind them again and again how much that you love them, and help them as they fall more and more in love with you every day. For the others of us, we've already been Christ followers for a while, and others who may not have even prayed that prayer, but we're struggling with sin in our lives. We're letting sin hang around too long. We set up camp near sin, and we're just being enticed by it We've allowed it to take control of our lives in so many ways. It's affecting our witness. It's affecting our relationships. It's affecting so much. I pray, God, that you would set us free. Set us free through your forgiveness right now. Lord, in your name I pray.